Are we in a new phase now that we've moved from stay at home to stay alert? Although Scotland, they're still staying at home, and of course all the world's nations are at different places on the path and no one really knows what to do anymore. Let's have a bit of a look at what's going on in our crazy new normal right now.
When this began, we hadn't seen this disease before, and we didn't fully understand its effects. With every day, we're getting more and more data. We're shining the light of science on this invisible killer.
Ah, the old light of science. Get the old science light, shine it on the invisible killers. If it's invisible, the light of science ain't going to make no bloody difference, mate. You can light up something that ain't visible till you're blue in the face. It's interesting, isn't it, how the discourse between a population and its leaders seems increasingly parental. Is that how patriarchy works, that those in positions of leaderships are like some divine father in the sky? Lay it down, naughty boy, keep still, don't grumble, bloody dog.
We said that you should work from home if you can, and only go to work if you must.
That's a good bit of body language, right? We said... Do you remember over there yesterday when you had to be on lockdown? In a way, you feel for the people in positions of leadership and of apparent authority, because it's a very difficult situation to evaluate. Perhaps all realities like that. Perhaps it is difficult always to know, to make decisions, to make choices. I suppose what we're thinking about really when we see leaders like Boris Johnson or Trump or whoever the hell it is that's in charge of your country making these kind of speeches is, are you being entirely authentic with us? Are you representing our best interests? Can we trust you? If you accept someone is competent, and I recognise there are question marks over most leaders, even with regard to that criteria, but if you respect that someone's competent, then it's only their integrity you're questioning. Do they really care about us? And what interests me most is, what is the normal that we're trying to return to? If one thing is true about this time, it's shown us that reality has been suspended, that there are thousands of different ways you can organise a society, all the things that were taken as read, there were sacred cows that could never be moved or never be changed, immutable realities because of our economy and because of the markets, suddenly all suspended, suddenly all recede into the distance. So perhaps it's possible that we can organise society in 1,000 different ways. Perhaps there are many, many different models. Perhaps we can explore different ways of organising society together rather than rushing to resume a system that weren't working that well for loads of people anyway.
Anyone who can't work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing, should be actively encouraged to go to work.
As Owen Jones pointed out in his column, this in a sense means that, like, a lot of people physically have to be there, and that normally means people that do stuff with their hands, which normally means manual workers. So as Owen Jones pointed out in his column, brilliant column, it's class politics in a sense. If you can work with your mind, you can stay at home. If your job is you make little YouTube videos and Instagram videos, then you can safely ensconce yourself in your homework environment. But God, if these hands had to do something actually useful, God help us all.
And we want it to be safe for you to get to work. So you should avoid public transport if at all possible.
What you need is chauffeur-driven factory labourers and construction site workers ferried to their places of work in their Daimlers.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson ditching his stay-at-home message for a new coronavirus catchphrase.
Stay alert, control the virus, and save lives.
I like how in this video it talks about how like it's a catchphrase, because in a sense it does show how the role of the politician is a kind of, in a sense, a sort of a national totem, or the role of at least a leader is a symbolic figure that has a degree of theatricality. To watch Boris Johnson's sort of literal table thumping speech with that, you know, the thumb on the top, sort of, hello there, like they're about to do that thing. It's like, you know, it's an interesting piece of theatrics. I feel like so much of Donald Trump's success is because he is a television politician that's been on television for a long time and exists outside of the kind of, I want to say, golden scale of ordinary political language. He talks in a very different way. I think it would be a shame if the aspiration after emergence from this period is a return to normal, when normal has become queried so consistently in the last 10 years, or even sort of post the cultural revolutions of the 60s, as a kind of way of imposing power. Like that, why would we return to that? Why would we return to propping up systems that have been artificially held together since sort of 2008? And you know, that's even with my limited knowledge of how global economies work. We should have a higher ambition than the resumption of normality, given that normality in itself was determined by lurching from crisis to crisis, in particular the sort of the ecological crisis that had dominated the news but hadn't really dominated our behaviour, certainly wasn't able to encourage us to change in any way.
What does 4, 3 and 2 actually mean?
People were saying
there's nothing written on there.
Absolutely meaningless.
A lot of people are sort of a bit confused by the graph, the green to red. I mean, we know from the old traffic lights, green's good, red's bad, red's a bit like blood, green's a bit like a leaf. I mean, that's the sort of semiotics of it, isn't it? We blush red in moments of awkwardness. I mean, what are the origins of red meaning danger? Fire, blood, I suppose, must be the origins of it. But in attempting to use semiotics in a situation where there's so much variability and where there is so little known. And I thought Boris Johnson actually was doing all right. He was sort of going, well, in the event that we do this, then this will happen. And in the event that this happens, it's sort of like he was doing Mission Impossible, moving those screens about. I couldn't help but think of Alan Partridge's World Cup thing, where he sort of goes, like where Alan Partridge tries to understand the way that the group stage of a World Cup moves into the knockout stage. It's a bit like that.
Take it round to Orlando there. Move those out of the way. Where's San Francisco? Right, just going to find San Francisco. Where is it?
So I suppose what we're being confronted with is a satirical situation, like a reality that seems like a kind of satire. And I suppose because we're in a suddenly thrust into a liminal space where we're dealing with a crisis that we don't understand, that's not what we thought that it was at first. But this situation here where we see a dude sat down like Boris Johnson, who's still got the pallor of a man who's not long been out of intensive care, hasn't he? Let's face it, not to mention a new father. Aren't you, as you're getting older, increasingly feeling for the humanity of the person, unable really to sort of see him as anything other than just a person bobbing about on history, as we all are? Even though nominally he's in this position of actual power, he can make decisions that affect the lives of millions for good or for ill. Increasingly, I don't know if this is because of what I'm going through myself, I just think, oh, this human being trying to work this out, sitting, trying to do a bedtime story for a nation about something so complex that he can't even really understand he really can't even relay its complexity. Again, it's difficult because it's a microbial contagion. It's like you've got to wrangle that into a narrative so you can get people to behave in accordance with your wishes, but the wishes are becoming increasingly less clear. And some people now are questioning, how do you ever end this? What is the way out of this? And in his attempt to explain that, in his attempt to sort of concretize this, he's made it sort of more obscure and more weird and almost sort of surreal. Johan Gesecki, an expert from Sweden who's bringing out some serious dour analysis on Australian TV, points out that there is no real easy way out of this situation. I mean, I suppose the novelty demanded that there was immediate action, immediate lockdown. You couldn't sort of really reflect and work out what was going on.
You introduced me by saying that I would say that you got it all wrong. I don't think you got it all wrong, but you painted yourself into a corner, and I'm watching with interest how you and 100 other countries will climb out of the lockdown. Because I don't think any government that I know gave a minute's thought about how they would get out of the different lockdowns that are installed. Take a school closure, for example. If you close the schools, when are you going to open them? What's the criteria? I don't think anyone thought about that when the closure was decided on.
Johan Gesek, Swedish scientist with that kind of European accent that always makes everything sounds like brutally cold logic. Well, I'm wondering how you're going to get yourself out of this corner you've painted yourself into. he does point out that it's bloody impossible now. When do you start schools again? When do you go back to work? Well, do New Zealand and Australia, countries that have successfully controlled the rate of spread of the infection, what do? Close their borders forever?
New Zealand may also succeed, but I've been asking myself, when New Zealand or Australia has stamped out every case in the country, what do you do for the next 30 years? Will you close your borders completely, quarantine for everyone who's going to Australia or New Zealand? Because the disease will be out there. I don't know how you're going to handle that, but that's your problem.
Whilst coronavirus is obviously a particularly unique and baffling situation, it really only serves to highlight that the way we've been living our lives for a long time, the way that we've been organising society for a long time, is unusual, dislocated, disconnected and unconscious. And this, I suppose, provides for us a real liminal space within which we can ask questions like, how do I want to organise society? How much do I want to work? For what reasons do I want to work? What are my values? What's important to me? What do I care about? And these are pretty good questions to be asking yourself while you live a finite life on a finite planet in infinite space. What is real? What's important? What do I care about? So I'm not surprised that no leaders have any real clear ideas, no journalists, no scientists, nobody really knows what's going on. In fact, perhaps one thing we can take from this is that we need to collectively organise new ways of living, collectively envisage new ways of living. And it seems to me, at least, that we can't rely on the old systems or the old authorities to provide us with solutions.